another Founder Wisdom podcast today with Garry Junkuhn. He is founder at 100K Father. So we're going to talk about a whole bunch of interesting topics today. Garry has an interesting business. He reunites fathers that have been taken away from their children's, which is a very precarious situation. And he reached out to me on LinkedIn. I was like, I need to have this guy on the pod. Garry, welcome. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and about your company?
Absolutely. Thank you, Charles, for having me. So 100K Fathers or 100,000 Fathers started out of a fire that ripped through my life, a very painful event. And that painful event was losing contact with my two sons when they were 10 years old and 13 years old. And I lost contact with them for over 3 years. And that just sent my life in a completely different direction to what I had ever imagined it would have gone. And in that changing of the course of my life, it allowed me to become a better man, a better father. The language that I was lacking in my communication with my sons on how to actually handle the situation of losing contact with them is so different if I were to go back in a time machine to have changed those sequence of events. And so it's with that knowledge that I have started 100K Fathers to be able to help other fathers who have gone through something similar. And it's often as a result of going through a messy divorce where one parent moves away, or it's just the two parents cannot actually see eye to eye, and the children get caught in the middle. And it results in the father not actually getting to see his children. But there's many other events that can take place. Often family court causes even greater problems there. Many events that keep the father away from his children. So that is my organization. It's mostly around parental alienation that I deal with, but there's a number of other situations that I deal with the fathers. And I'll talk very briefly. It's fathers that are in the early stages that have lost contact with their kids, maybe for a week or two, or can see all the signs of that unfolding, or many, many years, and their lives are just spiraling down. Just being a father is one of the most important things to those fathers, and not having their children in life slowly breaks them, and they can no longer focus on their own health, their relationships that they have, their work. All of those pillars start getting collapsed. So the program helps fathers rebuild their lives, honor their children by looking after their children, becoming the best version of themselves, and preparing them for if they ever have any contact with their children, on how to navigate that situation and not be a broken, drowning man, that it's the best version showing up when they do have that opportunity to meet up or have some form of contact with their children. So that's a very, very brief journey. I mean, it's been many, many years that I've been going through this and navigating fathers, and happy to share more around all of this.
Yeah, it isn't good solution to sign a prenuptial agreement saying that if we break up, we're gonna get like separate guard, and that's the end of that problem?
Yeah, that doesn't change if there is a lot of anger between the parents on what gets told to the children, and it can become very powerful seeds that get planted in that child's life. And it's often, the amount of cases I hear where over a divorce, and it's not in the US, divorce doesn't just take place over 3 or 4 weeks. Some cases take 7 years. So you imagine if it's become such a messy divorce over those years, there's become such animosity between the mother and the father. And a lot of the content that gets shared in that court gets passed on to the children. And this happens for both sides, not just fathers that go through this, mothers go through this as well. But I specifically focus in helping fathers. So it's those extreme situations, or even if the mother meets somebody else, gets married, that they want to then move to another state or country, there's not a lot of control that father has in that unfolding. He can try and fight that in court, but something like that could take sometimes a few years to try and fight that. But in going through court creates even more animosity. And so those children get caught in the middle of all of this. And that's where then eventually the child says, well, I don't want to see my dad. And just all these terrible stories gets told. I've heard this many times. The child gets told, dad is trying to take me away from you. That's why he's taking us to court. And it's just out of the desperation that the mother has to move on with her life, have the children always in her life. And as I was saying, the same thing happens with mothers losing contact with their kids. If the father meets somebody else and wants to move away, that can happen in that situation. So a piece of paper, a prenup, anything like that, even a custody agreement, just has no value or does not impact on those children. If the child says, I don't want to see my dad, there's no piece of paper that's going to enforce that.
Right. And what you're saying is that it might take 5 to 7 years of enforcement. Like, let's say that there's the prenup, right? And it says black on white that we both agree of the separate charge of the children. She might take the children with her and might decide to take them away from me, let's say. And yeah, we're going to get to preventive steps before that happens. But before the court orders that, yeah, we need to have separate guard, she would have like 5 to 7 years of literally like brainwashing the children before I get the guard of them. And then the children by then can decide to not want to spend time with me. Is that what you're saying?
That is definitely what can happen. And it's in extreme cases can be 5 years, 7 years, 10 years that I've heard. But even in a 1 year of going to court, which what it on the low end can take, a lot of the poisoning can actually take place during that time. And it's often in those teenage years or just preteen, where already that child is going through such a volatile time in their lives, so many changes, all the hormones are going through their bodies, and you plant in a seed of that your dad left us, your dad cheated on us, or he doesn't love us, or one of those things, dad didn't pay this, or any one of those things just becomes a very, very powerful seed in that little child's mind. And it is like a poison drop that is very hard to undo. And it's often only when that child is in his 20s or her 20s that that child is able to gravitate back to the father. But often the father is so broken by them.
Yeah. And what happens directly after divorce? Like, is there a legal procedure that it goes by default 50-50? When it comes to the guard, is there laws for that, or is just construct? Because most of the time the children will go with the mom. And yeah, what happens there? Like, is there a law in society that says that as soon as this happens, they should go 50-50, or it's up to both parents?
Many states are trying to implement that, or people are trying to petition for something like that. I mean, it's not an area that I get involved in at all, but many states are 23% custody for the father and the balance to the mother. And many, many states, there's very few that are 50-50 on default there. And the same applies in many other countries around the world, bar countries in Europe. There's many countries in Europe where, let's say Netherlands as an example, it is default there 50-50. Divorce can take place in 4 weeks. And so there is nothing to fight over there. There is no money to be gained by dragging this out by the lawyers and all the people involved in this. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry that feeds off the fact that a father doesn't get equal custody of their child. And it's a very, very complex thing. And it's only as fathers step into this very painful process where they initially feel that I've got all this evidence, it's so clear what's taking place here, I'm a great father, I should get to see my child 50% of the time. But as he goes through that court process and realizes, it's 2-3 years, costs him tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, the amount of cases I've heard where fathers spend upwards of $100,000, $500,000 is occasional cases, and over $1 million sometimes. And so that's so devastating and toxic to actually for both mother and father going through a process like that, and obviously the children.
Yeah, right. I'm not sure for that prenup, like I think you build these relationships and you get to have some hints about your spouse, but yeah, on their dark days, any human beings can experience anger and stress makes us do really silly things. So there's always that option, but I would like to think of me, although I never think about the divorce. I don't like to think about it. It's long-term and almost unconditional acceptance on my case. And as a leader, it's all on me, and I don't put anything on my spouse. It's like, how can I give the most love, and I try to be the best version of myself. I'm like that also in my business and so forth. That's my first level of protection, I guess, if we can even call it that, because I tend to be the no protection type of dude and always go all in and offense mode in everything that I do. But okay, then there's the potential prenup. If shit hits the fan, I would fancy myself as a very good persuader and tactician and really agile person that gets everything they want in life with my sheer IQ and EQ. I think I can accomplish anything. And if this becomes a battle, I can win any battle on my end. Although I don't want to get there, obviously. But if I would have to get there, I would use persuasion to get to my goals. And most of the time, this comes in thinking the best offers for my spouse. Let's say something that is win-win, right? Oh, can we do this? It would be in our both interest. Can I send you some money? Can I take care of you? You're a person that added lots of value in my life, so can I take care of you? And I guess that's how most divorce settlements end up. If you check Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates, they literally gave half of their fortunes to their wife, which is way too much. But is that really the question, Because when you think about that, oh, it's way too much, then you get angry, right? It's like, and I think at some point they don't need more money. And especially, I think that their spouse, they give it most of it to charities, which is a good thing. So what do you think about what I just said? Do you think it makes sense? Like, is it about being a good negotiator, a good tactician, a good salesperson, a good persuader, and not being one? What would you have to say?
Well, many people are able to navigate this without this resulting in a situation like this. But just according to the research on this, it's something in the region of 22 million parents don't get to see their children in the United States alone, let alone in Australia and other countries, Canada. And so
that is so much. I need to pause and say that that is so much. That's literally like 8% of the US population, which is ludicrous.
Yes. And so that's 40 million children, if it's you're looking at an average of 2 that don't get to see either one of the parents. And all the statistics on that is a child that doesn't get to see both the parents is seriously disadvantaged in this world. And that's what evokes this very powerful feeling inside of us to be able to protect and do whatever we can to get our child back into our life, that you can actually be there. And so these are very smart men that I work with, CEOs of companies, multiple company owners, school teachers, broad range of fathers that I work with, and incredible negotiators. But you get those extreme situations where it's beyond logic that is taking place here, where if there is that high conflict that takes place, where the one parent does not ever want to see that other parent again, and every time that one parent comes around to pick up the children to see on the visitation schedule, there is that chance of conflict. And it can also, and this is a very complex thing, where the one parent's trying to move on with their life, they meet another partner, and then the ex-husband or ex-wife comes around to pick up the children, and there's a conflict that takes place there. It can jeopardize that relationship. And so out of the preservation for that relationship, that one parent will then put obstacles in the way to stop that father from being able to see the children. And you can see how easily something like that can happen in society. And it doesn't happen to all, but it is in the region of 1 in 4, 1 in 5 children that are from divorced parents do not get to see one of the other parents. And so this is taking place throughout the world, mostly United States, Canada, Australia, UK, countries like that. And there is so little help that's out there. And what most pause that fathers go through, and even mothers, is they think going through family court is the way to solve this. But that often just brings gasoline to that fire. And a very quick little way or analogy here is, if you come across a tiger in the jungle, it's going to run away. You put that tiger into a cage and you step into that cage, you're going to see its claws. You make that cage smaller, you're going to see even more claws. And so this is where, as you start gathering evidence of, look, the mother of my children is keeping my children away from me, here's evidence, evidence, evidence. It just brings out more and more clause from her side. And so it's just this terrible fight that actually ensues with the children being caught in the middle. And so there are ways of navigating this, but most people don't know how to navigate this. And if they're not going through family court, they're giving up on their children. And nobody ever should give up on their children. But it is a very helpless and painful situations that parents go through in a situation like this. So you can be an amazing negotiator, amazing, and that is the way of handling it in those early stages, is to meet up and be fair and talk about it, that the children don't get caught in the middle. But sometimes two parents cannot do that. And that's what results here.
Right. And we're going to get to that, but legal is the final net, well, I think it's the barrel bottom. It's not even a net, mediation being a net. Legal is really like when you don't have other recourses, people need to know and understand that this is not, the ultimate solution. It's usually a shit show. I must also mention that in the case of divorces, you probably have the stats on that, but I think it's somewhat fair to say that a lot of them, especially involving young children, it's because a bomb exploded. So usually the husband cheating on the wife and the wife wanting to have the revenge, which is somewhat right. And I would even adventure myself. So I would estimate that probably half divorces around this time of age end that way. And I would estimate that half of these same divorce that occurred ended up in a pretty dramatic fashion. Do you concur? Do you agree with those estimations?
I've had so many fathers that I've spoken to around the world, along with mothers. Quite often it's as a result of their spouse having the affair. Sometimes they've had the affair. It feels like it's more on the other way around, but that's I'm having from a fairly skewed perspective because I'm only hearing mostly from fathers. But it's still, even if one partner has an affair, that means that they're not a great partner to be with, but doesn't mean that they're not a good father or a mother. And it should still separate those differences between the mother and the father, that they still have the common interest of the children, regardless if they couldn't work things out that you can still allow the children to be able to both see the parents. And there shouldn't be that punishment because one person had an affair. There's a lot of things that lead up to one partner having an affair in a relationship, a lot of needs not being met. But that doesn't mean that that person is a bad father or a bad mother. So that's a very important distinction there.
Relationships are so hard, there's no black and white, but I would definitely say that someone that had an affair and lied and wasn't strong enough to put it forward or to end the relationship before and broke the agreement is likely not to be a good parent, just because they have low grit, low resilience, low patience. And yeah, there's all these books that I've read, right? Esther Perel and so forth, but it's still the reality, especially as a man, you need to lead, this is weakness right there. It's like you not having your needs met. And like you and I talked about the last time, a man needs to have multiple pillars. It's not because your let's say your sexual needs or your love needs aren't met in that period that you need to find another way that breaks the agreement to go fetch them. So anyway, this is kind of a pointy opinion that I have, kind of as usual. Getting back to how to resolve this, and I guess that's a part of your job as, well, you're not a mediator, but I think that's what I would do. I would take a very empathetic mediator and I would talk, so this would be part therapy. Actually, 80% of it would be therapy. And as a result, if we see some healing out of these sessions, then we could negotiate the arrangement. I feel it's like the emotions that come out first, and it might take a long time to heal, but I'm a very strong proponent of never breaking the communication. When there are communication discrepancies, that's where we see the shit show. That's where we see the fire burning. that's where we see the jealousy, you know, like, and in court, it's me against her, you know, is how can I make her look the most outrageous so that I can win my case. And then guess what? The other side does the same. It's like you said, it puts gasoline on the fire. So is that part of what you do, this kind of mediation, or it's only working with the man? Because me, that's where I would bring it. And just like in business, right? That I don't want to go straight up to court. I want to talk to you. I want to resolve this. I want to find a solution that's win-win, you know, that's, or the fabric of our society. It's trust, it's trade, you know, it's me trading a cow for a house, for example. So yeah, what do you do exactly to fix that shit show?
Yeah, good question there. So definitely don't get involved at all in the relationship between the mother and father. There's no mediation, no counseling in that regard. This is helping a father if he's seeing the early stages of losing contact with their children. Child might be saying, "Oh, I don't want to see you this weekend," or you know, might be saying things that are from the actual court case being passed on to the child. Well, why did you leave mom? It's like, you know, why do you even know about those details? And so what the father can feel this rumbling oncoming train coming towards him, and he doesn't want to lose contact with his kids. He wants to be able to keep seeing them. And so it's these tools for a father that is going through something like that to get him into the best possible place, tools to help him sleep, help him reduce his stress and anxiety, other ways to strengthen his body, remove toxins out of his life, unhealthy food that doesn't serve him. Don't ever go towards any like alcohol to be able to numb the pain that you're actually going through here. Rather go to the gym and exercise and do all of those things, connect with friends, get into nature. And so that's then the same applies for a father who hasn't seen his kids for 2 weeks and it feels like his life has ended, to a father who hasn't seen it for 10 years and feels that he cannot be happy because he doesn't have his children within his life. So by realizing that this might be one of the biggest gifts that has taken place in his life because it changes the course of his life. It's like a fire that rips through a forest. It burns everything, but it allows to clean out a lot of rubbish that might have been in that father's life, things that don't serve him. If he looks at this as a gift and starts taking action on those things, he can start going in an upward spiral journey that if he does ever get to see his children, maybe once a month, or child reaches out after 6 months or 3 years, he isn't this angry, broken man just purely gathering evidence for court. He's been going to gym 3 to 5 times a week. He's got no rubbish food within his life. He doesn't drink alcohol. He's not taking drugs. He's helping out in society. He is going in an upward spiral. Each of the things, he's trying to become the best version of himself. And by even like volunteering your time, and you start helping somebody else out that's less fortunate than yourself, put your own journey in perspective and you start feeling grateful for what you do have. And so that is the area that we focus on, is helping a father become the best version of himself, preparing him if he ever has any interactions or contact with his child, that he's not a drowning man, that he's the best version of himself, that it's this movie that the child wants to become a part of. It's a gravitational force. And that's these pillars that it applies to every man's life. What I'm saying here, and this can be prevent so much of this from unfolding. So that's what I'm hoping for some of your listeners to this podcast, to take this wisdom that you work on yourself. You don't lean on your partner for your happiness and for everything else, but you find it inside of yourself. And through these actions you can take.
Right. I guess at some point, maybe even being ultra patient and realizing that this might not be possible for a couple of years, you know, and just be ultra patient like myself in business. You know, I've been doing it for 10 years. I still haven't gotten my billions, my trillions, but I'm very patient and I know that I'll get there eventually. I've seen so many of my friends being not broken, but being disadvantaged by that. I even had one of my best friends that was kidnapped by his father because the father didn't spend enough time with him. I don't know what the father was thinking, you know, kidnapping a child, and imagine what the child will think. I think he put him in a closet for like a day or something like that. He probably got into big legal trouble because of that. I've also had multiple of my best friends growing up without a father, like how's that for life to grow up without a father? What does that do to psyche? Most of them ended up well, but you can still see the scars of that. My parents have been married for 30 years. There were some points in the relationship, like any couple, that it was very fiery or fiery, and I was scared as a child. I was scared, and I remember that. So imagine a divorce, what it does to a little child's heart. So yeah, definitely don't go the kidnapping way. Yeah, I love what you're offering, Garry. Like, these are all great tools. I mean, it's not getting to the root of the problem, and I think because the mother with the children is nuclear weapon, right? It's an adult's mind influencing a child's mind, and that's very, very easy, especially coming from a mother, right? So she will put like stuff in the child's head like you've never seen before, and the child will mostly believe that. So it's kind of a David vs Goliath fight. But what you're doing is helping the dad kind of cope with that if yeah, the guard of the children is not separate. And that's I love this. It's very, I love the business niche also. I think it's not a common thing. And yeah, I'm a believer in everything that you do. So thank you for what you've shared today. Where can people find out more about you, Garry?
They can Google 100K Fathers, or just go to 100K-fathers.com, and they'll be able to go onto the website. And it's this combination that we work with fathers that are able to afford the program, but there's many fathers that are broken through this. It's probably only 1 in 20 fathers that contact us that haven't spent everything that they have and got into terrible debt going through court to try and see their kids. So I've built out a self-guided program that I've made so much more accessible. And if fathers can't even afford that, there's occasional times that I gift that to the fathers to be able to at least give them a lifeline, to be able to allow them to realize there are tools available to them, and it's not just going through this toxic family court path, and they can start get an understanding of what their child is going through, some key ways on how to communicate with their children, some main rules to not break and pitfalls to fall into. And so that is in that self-guided program. And then we've got an 8-week program, an intensive program I guide fathers through. Plus we've got a community. So there's a range of different ways that we help and support fathers going through this very, very painful situation here.